Hi, I'm Jono, and if you're new here, I do pencil drawings. One of the biggest challenges I've found in my drawing practice is drawing hair. I've really struggled with it throughout the years, and I've always kind of just winged it, and somehow managed to get the texture right. There's been times where the hair looks a little bit wiry or not quite right, but generally it's in the ballpark that I'm looking for. So in this video, I wanted to share with you some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years to just kind of get my hair looking a little bit better. Also, a huge thank you to Squarespace once again for sponsoring this video. Let's jump into it. Hair can be so overwhelming. It's a complex texture, and so to help, it's always good to try and break it down into larger shapes. This takes some practice, so I would suggest taking a couple reference images of different types of hair and try blocking them out just to get a feel for it. I'll also upload a bunch of images of hair on my Patreon page just so you guys can play around with them and try and get a feel for blocking out the larger shapes. Once you have the swing of things, you'll start to notice similar patterns and shapes that repeat themselves in the way that hair falls. It's also pretty important to familiarize yourself with the process. Often we can get quite despondent with a new texture that we're trying to render out when it doesn't look like we want it to look early on. I think just having that patience for yourself, being able to acknowledge that, cool, it's not looking right, but I'm on the right track, is something to become comfortable with. So specifically with hair, it can very easily not look at the level of detail that you want it to look. It can look very cartoony in the beginning, and that's fine. That's how it should look early on. So be comfortable with the process, be comfortable with it not looking perfect in the beginning. You're going to refine it, and it actually all kind of comes together at the last steps. Once I have my shapes marked out, I personally like to emboss my hair. This is just a technique that my mom taught me long ago, and it's become a way that I like to try and get a little bit of extra texture in the hair that I'm drawing. Once we've embossed most of the areas, we can go back in and start creating volume to the shapes. Things aren't going to look perfect yet, so be kind to yourself as you go along. Again, experiment with this. It's important to figure out what looks good and what doesn't. Confident strokes are really important, and avoiding any mechanical, harsh, repetitive strokes is pretty important as well when it comes to drawing hair. You want to try and keep like a organic flow with each of your strokes, or just have the initial start point and disappearing point of your pencil strokes or even your embossing strokes be tapered off. So try and get used to kind of gradually increasing the pressure and then gradually releasing it as well. When you're working on the volume, try to use pencil strokes that follow the flow of the hair. This will help your textures later on in quite a subtle but really important way. The process takes time. It's important not to get impatient. I constantly have to remind myself to slow down and enjoy the process. There's actually a lot to be said about tempo and pace when you're drawing, especially with something that's complex or can be quite tricky to get into. I think if you're feeling anxious or pressed for time, your mark making will actually reflect that. It's really important to try and slow yourself down and just find a good rhythm. Now I'm going to go over the drawing with some cotton wool to try and find a midpoint for my tone. This also just helps soften my pencil strokes so it looks more subtle and a little bit more organic in my opinion. I'll go back into the darks with my AP pencil because the cotton wool lifts out a lot of the graphite and softens your contrast quite a bit. Next, I'm going to start lifting out some of my highlights, and this is actually where all the kind of magic happens. This is where the illusion is created. So pay attention to where you want to lift highlights out. If there's a curl that's catching some light, you want to lift only the highlight out in the center of that curl. It's also important to familiarize yourself with how the highlights on hair work. Usually they taper off, so you don't want just a harsh, blocky kind of highlight. You want something that starts off quite thin, or maybe starts off quite faint and grows in intensity and then fades off again. A lot of hair texture follows this kind of rule, so just keep an eye out for any reckless kind of blocky motion. Another tip here is to be really gentle with your erasing. You can allow some of the random mark making that you did earlier in the drawing to almost dictate how the highlights fall. Don't just brutally go in and erase everything, because this often allows for opportunities for shapes and things that aren't in your reference but are really interesting to kind of come to light and add more character to your drawing. I'll go back into it again with my mechanical pencil and just get some really fine little details in the highlights to bring out more detail. And finally, I'll go into it with my electric eraser. This is now to get highlights out of the very dark areas and to bring in some loose strands. This is really the last part of the render which brings it to life. You can actually have a large volume with very subtle suggestions of hair and then have one or two loose strands flowing over it or flowing behind it, which kind of trick the eye into thinking that the whole volume is made up of all these individual little strands. So this is kind of the last ingredient to the render that brings it to life. So there we go. Before I end this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. They actually helped my career out early on in such a huge way, just by having a very easy platform for me to create an online portfolio, to get in touch with clients and to help clients find me. And I felt that Squarespace did that so effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them or set up an online store. And most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use this offer code and get 10% off your first purchase. I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. Hair is really difficult. I've always struggled with it, but I think with some of these kind of fundamental tips, I've managed to navigate my way through drawing hair in most of my drawings, and I've actually started to really enjoy it. The more I studied it, it was less daunting. So hopefully this can help you guys out with your hair drawings. Let me know what you'd like to see in the next video. As always, thank you so much for the support. If you found it helpful, please leave a like. It helps the channel out in a massive way. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.